y'all, today I am going to talk about all the books that I read and finished this summer. I'm not the type of person who reads several books in 1 month, so I don't really want to do like a monthly wrap up. My goal is normally to read at least 3 books per month, so I don't really read a lot per month. But I think a seasonal wrap-up works well for me. The first book I read this summer was 12th Night by Alexene Farol Follmuth, also known as Olivie Blake. If you don't know, Alexene is the name she uses for her YA romance, and Olivie is the name she uses for her adult fiction. This is supposed to be a retelling of Shakespeare's 12th Night, which I've never read, but one of my favorite books is also based on it. That book is All Men of Genius by Lev AC Rosen. 12th Night is a dual point of view romance about 2 people, Jack and Vi, who really do not get along at school. Vi doesn't like Jack because he neglects his student body president duties, and Jack doesn't like Vi because she's honestly kind of an unpleasant person. But then Jack's girlfriend starts sort of distancing herself from him, so he makes a deal with Vi to try to find out what's going on there, and in exchange he starts to take his student body president duties more seriously. He also gets injured playing football and suddenly has a lot of free time on his hands, so he starts playing this game online, and he doesn't realize that he's playing with Vi, even though Vi knows that he's playing with her. Because I did like that other book based on 12th Night, I was pretty excited for this one, but I honestly didn't like it very much. I was really tempted to DNF in the beginning because I found Vi very annoying, but my sister told me that it gets better and she gets less insufferable as the story goes on. And it did. I did like it more later, but I just found her really annoying in the beginning. She was so upset by the fact that you kind of have to be nice to people to get them to like you. I was also annoyed with Jack in the beginning because I'm like, why do you need to make this deal just to take your duties seriously? But yeah, they did get less annoying as the story went on and they grew closer to each other, and there were actually some pretty cute moments between them. I grew to actually like Jack, and Vi just got a bit less annoying. I gave this book 3.25 stars. The next book I read was A Magical Girl Retires, which is about a 29-year-old woman who just lost her job and then she's about to jump off a bridge, but then she gets interrupted by a magical girl who tells her that she is the magical girl of time and she has to save the world. It was really cool to see the world building and see how the magical girls exist in the modern world, but other than that, I honestly didn't find the story that compelling. It was just interesting enough for me to keep going, but it was an enjoyable read. I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book I read was The Mask of Haliya, Heir to the Warrior Moon, which is the first volume in a comic book series. It's about a girl named Marisol whose mother takes her to the Philippines because she's been kicked out of too many schools, and Mari then discovers this mysterious mask that gives her terrifying visions and powers. It was really nice to see a comic book that takes place in the Philippines, and I really loved the art, and I think the story was beautiful and gripping. I gave it 5 stars, not because I think it's perfect. Like, there were some things, like a couple scene changes were a bit jarring, but there's nothing that really bothers me about it, and I think it accomplished what the beginning of a series should do. It got me to care about the characters and made me want to see what happens next. The next book I read was The Dragon's Promise, which is the last book in a duology, and it's the sequel to 6 Crimson Cranes. I guess I can't really summarize the second book since that would spoil the first book, but I really liked 6 Crimson Cranes. I gave that one 5 stars. That book is about a girl named Shiori who flees her betrothal ceremony, and then her brothers get cursed to turn into cranes. So she tries to save her brothers, but she's also not allowed to talk because she's cursed to not speak or her brothers will die. And yeah, I thought it was just a really cool YA Asian fantasy, and I had high hopes for the second book because Shiori also has this dragon friend that was not as prevalent as I expected in the first book, and he seemed like he would be more of a character in this book, so I was excited to see more of him, but I actually didn't really like him as much in The Dragon's Promise. I also thought that the story kind of felt like it was dragging on, and I just wanted to be done with it. Yeah, I gave it 2 stars. The next book I read was Alone with You in the Ether by Olivie Blake. I always say I have mixed feelings about Olivie Blake, but I'm still going to read every book by her that gets traditionally published, because I do overall love her books. I might not read another one of her YA books that she writes as Alexene, but Olivie Blake books I will read. Alone with You in the Ether is a very character-focused book, so there's honestly not much of a plot to describe, but it's about two people who meet and agree to have, I think, 6 conversations. The guy is a teacher who is obsessed with time travel, and the girl is a former counterfeit artist with bipolar disorder. And yeah, I just really loved their interactions. I think that the book was a very interesting exploration of what two people can bring out in each other, and I just found the book very enjoyable. It also has the most powerful acknowledgements that I've ever read, so definitely stick around for those. I gave this 4.5 stars. The next book I read was a manga called Spider-Man Fake Red. I just happened to see this in an FYE, and I was like, interesting that there's a Spider-Man manga. And I wasn't gonna get it, but then I was flipping through and I saw that Silk was in it, and Silk is my favorite superhero, so I was like, I need to get this now. It's about this high schooler named Yu. He happens to find Spider-Man's costume in an alleyway, and then he realizes that Spider-Man is missing, so he starts to put on the costume, and he tries to, be a hero so that the villains don't realize that Spider-Man's gone. I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was okay, nothing particularly memorable. I don't really think it was worth reading just for Silk. The next thing that I read was actually a short story, Sacred Hospitality by Olivie Blake, which is a prequel short story to the Atlas 6. It's just like random snippets of the characters before the book. It's mostly about Nico and Libby, and I actually really love them, and that's why I wanted to read the story. But I actually didn't like the parts about them because it was basically just them being immature and unable to work together. I know a big part of their relationship is the negative feelings they have toward each other, but I feel like they were just too immature, and it's kind of weird going back and reading this after completing the trilogy. I mean, it's fine. I just gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was The Reckoning of Roku by Randy Ribay. I wasn't that interested in Roku, but I was still excited for this book, mostly because the author is Filipino, and I decided to just give another Avatar prequel novel a try since I DNF'd Dawn of Young Chen. This book is about Roku's life after he finds out that he is the Avatar. He starts his airbending training, but then his friend Sozin requests his help in driving earthbenders off of a Fire Nation owned island. And Roku ends up going with Gyatso, who was a pretty significant character in Aang's life in the flashbacks of the show, so that was really cool to see. I also really ended up loving Roku and Gyatso both as characters, and I just love their friendship with each other. It's really interesting to see Roku's internal conflict and seeing how he struggles with being detached from the Fire Nation, because he can't be loyal to any one nation, but he feels an obligation to the nation that he grew up in. It was also really nice to see how little bits of Filipino culture are incorporated as well. Like, there's a sign of respect of bringing someone's hand to your forehead for a blessing, and that was there. I would definitely say this is a character-focused story. There were some moments where the plot felt kind of slow, but it was sort of to give the characters time to just talk to each other. But because of that, there were sort of times where I didn't really feel driven to keep going, so I sort of had to force myself to keep reading. I wasn't like hating it, but I wasn't like super compelled either. But overall, I really enjoyed the book, and I'm excited for the second book and to see where Roku's relationship with Sozin goes. I know it's headed downhill, but I just want to see it happen. I gave this 4 stars. The next book was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. 2 of my coworkers actually read this before me. One finished it within 2 days, and she said she really loved it, but then the other one said that she didn't finish because she thought that the main character was too annoying. But I love R.F. Kuang, so I went into this with pretty high expectations. Yellowface is about a woman named June who had this author friend named Athena Liu, but then Athena dies and June steals her manuscript about Chinese laborers in World War I. She then decides to use a pen name, Juniper Song, which sounds more Asian, but she insists that it's just using her middle name that her mom gave her. But it does cause a lot of confusion with people thinking she's Asian. There's a lot of questions raised in the book about who is allowed to write what and things like that. And I thought it was just a brilliantly written book, even though I think that the main character is generally a bad person and she's done bad things. There are aspects of her character that I find relatable, like she has anxiety and she really does have passion for writing, so I can understand why she does the things that she does. And I don't find her unbearably annoying. I understand that she is supposed to be unlikable, so I'm not that annoyed by her. My least favorite part of the book was the climax, but it didn't ruin my enjoyment of the book overall. I think R.F. Kuang did an amazing job of conveying a message without it coming off as too forced or preachy. I think that every outburst felt earned. I gave the book 4.75 stars. The next book I read was Howard the Duck Volume 1, Duck Hunt. Yeah, I just thought it might be a fun comic to read, but I was very bamboozled because this actually starts with Volume 0, and I thought Volume 1 was the first one in the series, but it's not. And I thought the book was just okay. I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was How We Fall Apart by Katie Zhao. This book is about students at an elite high school, and it's about the former friend group of this girl who was recently murdered. And then someone posts on this gossip app that their secrets are going to be revealed, so they band together and try to find out who the murderer is. The main character in this book is actually a scholarship student, and stories about scholarship kids surrounded by rich people will always kind of resonate with me in some way. My family's not poor, but I was a scholarship kid in high school, and I did feel a bit less privileged than some of my peers. This is also something I really love about If You Could See the Sun by Ann Liang, because the main character in that is also a scholarship student. I really like how there are specific examples of how Nancy is affected by her relative status. Like, she sees how her friend could fly overseas to see her relatives every year, while Nancy's family was too poor for her to ever see her relatives, so she doesn't even really know them. I also did like most of the book, but then I didn't like the climax and resolution. I feel like the climax went really off the rails, and for this one it did kind of sour my opinion of the book a bit, but it was fine. I mean, I don't regret reading it. I gave the book 3 stars. The next book I read was Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen. This book is about a girl named Yang who sees her father die and watches the murderer escape, and so she leaves home by herself to find out more about his murder. She also happens to get the opportunity to enter the trials to become a part of the engineering guild, which is the group that her father used to be a part of. So she remains disguised as a boy to enter the trials. I did overall enjoy reading the book throughout the whole story, but I do think that there are some pretty glaring flaws. Like, I think the story doesn't really balance Ying's 2 goals very well. I feel like her goal to get into the engineering guild quickly overshadows her goal to find out more about her father's murder. It really seems like she's more focused on the guild. I also kind of wish that the engineering test had higher stakes. Since her original plan was to try to find out more without being in the guild, it kind of feels like if she fails the test, she can just go back to her original plan, so it never really felt high stakes. Ying herself is an okay protagonist. I think some of her decisions are pretty admirable, but I do think she's pretty mean to her friend. That friend is actually my favorite character in the book, because he starts off as this snooty little kid, but then he ends up being like a really good friend to her, but she's kind of mean to him. It's sort of like in an older sibling way, but they're not actually siblings, so it just feels like she's not respecting a boundary. But yeah, I did keep reading more because I was compelled by the plot than by the characters. I gave this 3.5 stars. 2 similar books that I would recommend if you are interested in something similar are All Men of Genius, which is one of my favorite books, and it's also about a girl who disguises herself as a guy to be in this, I think it's an engineering school or something related to science. But if you want to read something else that is by an Asian author with Asian characters, then I would recommend Spin the Dawn. I did not read the sequel to that, but I pretty much enjoyed the first book. And again, it is about a girl who disguises herself as a guy and undergoes some tests. The last book I finished was Lavender House by Lev AC Rosen, same author as that book I just recommended, All Men of Genius. I listened to the audiobook of this, and normally I struggle with audiobooks because I tend to zone out a lot, but I think the narration of this was very good and the story was gripping enough that I paid attention. This book takes place in the 1950s, and it is about a man who was just fired from his job as a cop because it was discovered that he's gay, and so he gets hired to investigate a murder in a house that is secretly full of queer people, and it's like a queer found family in there. I thought the mystery was interesting enough, but mostly I liked the interactions between the characters. I think the main character was developed really well through his internal conflicts. He does have some guilt from having been a cop, so he regrets not doing more to help queer people. He's also conflicted because, he has to find a murderer within the first chosen queer family that he's ever seen, and he doesn't want to tear them apart, but he has to find the truth. Obviously, there is some homophobia portrayed in this book, but it never feels like it's just there for the sake of the setting. The portrayals also show a purpose in showing us how the characters react to it. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I would highly recommend. So yeah, those are the books that I have finished this summer. The book I'm currently reading is the second Penguindrum novel, which I'm actually liking so far. I think the first book I didn't really like the writing style as much, but I don't know why. The second book, for some reason, I'm just enjoying more. It's based on the anime of the same name, so I wouldn't really recommend reading the books without having seen the show, because it is a very visual type of story. But I think if you've seen the show and then you want to revisit it later in a new way, then the books are pretty decent for that, and it's nice to see the more internal thoughts of the characters. So yeah, those are the books that I read this summer. Let me know some of your summer reads if you'd like in the comments. You could let me know a favorite or a disappointment or whatever you want. It's just nice to hear from people. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found something rad.